What's going on, everyone? My name is Kevin Libwood and welcome to another tutorial video for the CLC Genomics Workbench platform. Today's video is a sort of bridge between two previous tutorials on two separate CLC Genomics features. The first of which was a video series led by Joel Savinsky regarding CLC Workbench workflows, and he showed users how to construct a CLC workflow for SARS-CoV-2 analysis. And the second tutorial was a video series that I led to demonstrate how to write and use CLC external applications, one of which being for IvarTrim, a bioinformatics tool for removing primer read data from reference alignments. And so in this video, I'm going to be bridging those two concepts to show you how you can modify Workbench workflows to incorporate external applications. So if you haven't watched those previous videos, I highly recommend going back to check those out, as I'll be basing today's demonstration on the SARS-CoV-2 workflow that Joel built and using the IvarTrim external application that I wrote. Links to both of these tutorials are in the description below. All right, so let's hop into it. All right, so you can see here that I've got the complete SARS-CoV-2 workflow that Joel wrote imported into my CLC Workbench platform. Also down here, you'll see that I have access to all three external applications accessible in my Workbench toolbox. That's MAVT, RaxML, and most importantly, IvarTrim. I also imported all of the read data, primer tracks, and the reference assembly that Joel used throughout his tutorial series. We'll use these later to demo a run of the modified workflow. Links to download all of these data and Joel's workflow, as well as instructions to write these external applications, are available in the description below. Okay, so once you have your screen looking like mine, you'll be able to follow along with me step by step to incorporate this IvarTrim external application into this SARS-CoV-2 workflow. Though, even if you aren't using this exact workflow and these exact external applications, you should still be able to follow along if you want to include any external application into any workflow, because this process, by design, will be exactly the same. All right, so for this workflow specifically, our focus is right here. So let's zoom in a bit so we can see what's going on. Okay, so you can see here that Joel used the CLC tool for primer trimming in his workflow. And if we want to swap this out, let's first take note of what's going into this application and what's coming out for downstream analysis. So you can see here, feeding into this tool is the read mapping input, primer track, and the reference genome. And then coming out, you'll see that it feeds the read mapping output into the indels and structural variants tool, as well as the local realignment tool. Okay, so now we have note of that. Let's go ahead and remove this application. Come down here to add element, and we'll scroll down to external applications and select IvarTrim. Okay, and once that pops up onto your screen, let's drag it down here so we can see what's going on. And you can see that it takes in the same inputs as the previous element, read mapping, primer tracks, and reference, and also generates read mapping output. So then let's just make sure we're feeding it the right inputs here. So read tracks, primers, and the reference genome. And then let's link the output to the appropriate applications downstream. So let's take this read track and map it to the indel structural variants and local realignment tools. And for the CLC trimming app, this was called read mapping output. But if you configured IvarTrim in the same way as me, this should be the read mapping tracks feeding into these downstream applications. All right, and just like that, we now have our Ivar external application integrated into this SARS-CoV-2 workflow. There is one more thing I want to change here if we zoom into the bottom again. So in Joel's workflow here, he uses this export Excel tool to write an Excel file to the user's local system. Unfortunately, because this workflow now uses an external application, the job is actually running on the CLC Genomics server and thus writes this file to that external server rather than the user's local system. And things get a bit tricky when you try to transfer an Excel file from the server to the local system using the Workbench import and export tools. So instead, we're just going to go ahead and get rid of this export tool. And at the end of the run, I'll show you how you can export the CLC element to your local system as an Excel file. So we're going to go ahead and right click and remove. Okay, and once you have things saved, everything should be good to go to run. So let's go ahead and click the run button here at the bottom right. All right, so things are going to be running on the CLC server environment because we are using that external application. Then we'll select all of that read data that we imported from Joel's tutorial there. Great. We'll keep the default metadata in batch overview. We are inputting the reference genome there, the SARS-CoV-2 reference genome. We have the Arctic v3 primers. All of this is the same, and then we'll go ahead and select an output directory, and that one you can see is empty right now, and it should be populated with all the results once we get things going. All right, so we'll let this run, and I'll show you how to export that Excel file once things complete. All right, now that the modified workflow is complete, you can see that I have a fully populated output directory here. And so if you want to export that combined mapping report to an Excel file, you can go down here to reports, find that combined report file, and just use the standard exporter. We're going to go ahead and click Excel. And you'll see now this is running from the workbench. Have that file already selected, keep all these the same, and then we're going to go ahead and just export it to my desktop for ease of access. All right, so you can see that file here on my desktop. So if I go ahead and open that up, you can see that this is the same combined reports file that is generated with Joel's original SARS-CoV-2 workflow. The only difference here is that instead of the CLC application for trimming, we were able to use that IvarTrim external application. All right, so that wraps things up for this video. If you guys have any questions, as always, just leave those in the description below, and we'll get to as many as we can. I'll see you guys in the next one.